Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here on short notice. I know it was a long night for all of us. The hallmark of our American democracy has always been our commitment to free and fair elections. It is the people, not the powerful, who choose our leaders. And the American people have spoken. For many of us, what they have said is painful, hard to fathom, and difficult to process. But in this country, we respect the will of the people, and we abide by the results of our elections. As governor, I serve all New Jerseyans, no matter who you voted for. And just as I have worked to better the lives of the 4.5 million New Jerseyans who voted in 2020, regardless for whom they cast their ballot, I will serve all New Jerseyans with the same commitment after this election. And by the way, the number looks like it's going to land somewhere between 4.2 and 4.3 million. And remember, 2020 was an all-time record, and it was vote by mail exclusively. So the amount of folks who showed up and voted this time, whether it was through the mail, in person early, or on game day, is a very impressive number. This year, there is no doubt the margins in our state were far tighter. And by the way, if you look at other similar states, you'll notice that their margins shrank just about the same. Illinois, New York, Maryland, ourselves, California, all came in somewhere between 10 and 12 points relative to the performance in 2020. Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz ran a campaign grounded in so many of our state's shared values, and I thank them for a hard-fought race. And as we look toward the future, our administration is committed to working with President Trump wherever we can to advance New Jersey's interests, just as we did throughout his first term. Our commitment, again, is not to any person or party, but to the people of New Jersey and to the rule of law. And it is precisely for that reason, as we respect the peaceful transition of power, that if there is any attack on the Garden State or on any of its communities from Washington, I will fight back with every fiber of my being. But just as it is our responsibility to continue to stand up against any threat to our state or to our people, it is also our responsibility to take any opportunity that presents itself to work with the president to protect and uplift the people of our state, because that is what responsible leaders do. In many respects, we began our administration on this same note, with President Trump having been sworn in the year before. Indeed, we governed alongside the Trump administration for our first 3 years. And while my administration stood up fiercely during President Trump's first term on things like defending a woman's right to choose, advancing common sense gun safety policies, protecting our immigrant communities, we will continue to do so on all of these fronts and many more. But we also showed our ability to work with him and his team to advance policies and initiatives that make life better for New Jerseyans. In June of 2020, by example, I sat across the table from President Trump in Bedminster and urged him to authorize the Portal North Bridge project, one of the most critical infrastructure initiatives in the nation. The president heard my argument and greenlit the project literally that night, and that project is well underway. It is on track, it is under budget, it's on time, and it will be completed next year, and it will be a game changer. And likewise, during the dark days of the pandemic, I and our team worked closely with the Trump administration to ensure that New Jersey had access to every federal resource we needed to save lives. And as I've said many times before, I will never forget their help, especially in that period of March, April, May, and June of 2020. So the point is that we have been down this road before. And when we have put New Jersey and our shared values first, we have emerged stronger. We have faced extreme adversity before, And when we refuse to give in, we have emerged tougher. We've been fearful of what the future holds before. Our allies and adversaries alike waiting to see what path we chose. And when we have stayed true to our values, we have emerged more united as a nation, as a state, and as a people. Well, I know it may sound counterintuitive at a moment such as this. This is a nation that celebrates what unites us as much as what sets us apart. A nation where you can vote as you please, pray as you choose, and be who you are. And despite it all, and even at a moment like this, we are still united by a common sense of purpose. America demands work from each successive generation. It demands we be active citizens. It is not easy. No one ever said it would be. But it is good and noble work that is worth doing, even as the dust settles on this election. So today, at a time of great division in our nation, when the bonds between our fellow citizens have grown so frayed, let New Jersey be united in making our state and, as a model, indeed, our nation, the best place to live, work, and raise a family. The people of New Jersey have never stopped believing in our great American experiment, and today is no exception. There is more work to be done for sure, and I promise you we will do it. May God continue to bless the great state of New Jersey and the United States of America. Let me take this off. This note is a helpful one. It says speaking order 1, Phil Murphy, which was news to me. Thank you, David. Any questions?
Yes, Governor.
David had his hand up first.
So, you lost the presidency, you lost the popular vote. I don't need to run down the score for you. How is this not a total repudiation of the Democratic Party's philosophy?
Yeah, I'm reminded of a reporter asking Bill Belichick at one point, remember in the third quarter, you had the ball on the 47-yard line, and Belichick interrupted and said, I was at the game too. What's your question? So thank you for not going through the list. I appreciate it. Listen, it's a sobering moment. How could it not be? Including in New Jersey. You know, we've been trying to war game this and do a postmortem, and we still don't have all the answers, all the numbers. Some of them are still moving around. The House looks like it's also going to go away, although I'm praying that that doesn't happen. Margin in 2020 in New Jersey was 17-ish points. This year it's 5-ish. It's hard not to be sober about that and reflect. I think in some respects our re-election might have been the canary in the coal mine. It's clearly economic kitchen table issues. It's immigration. No matter what the facts are, it's probably crime and public safety. And it's time to look in the mirror and make sure either changing substance, if it needs to be changed, or changing how we communicate what we stand for.
To what do you attribute the defection of whatever the percentage was of black male voters, male Latino voters? Where is the disconnect there? What is the Democratic Party not saying
Yeah.
to attract those voters?
Again, we don't have the numbers in New Jersey, and I'm proud of the fact in both elections to pick the African-American community, we carried that vote 94-6 twice. So that is very different than it appears what happened yesterday nationally. I think it's a combination of some of the things I just mentioned, David. It's kitchen table / economic issues. It's fear-mongering on immigration, and by the way, that's not to suggest we don't need a comprehensive immigration reform as a country, which we do. But they were able to play that card quite effectively. They were able to play a crime and safety card quite effectively. I'm happy to say down ballot, with a couple of exceptions, we did really well yesterday in New Jersey. So I've just been calling and texting a bunch of folks who were on the ballot. And, you know, with the exception of a couple, Sue Altman would be a sadly for me and for a lot of folks who support her, would be an exception. But for the most part, it didn't carry down ballot. President Trump won Passaic County, and yet the county candidates on the Democratic team all won effectively. So there's probably no one magic wand answer, and it probably also depends on the actual race involved. Please.
What did Mrs. Harris do wrong? Was she the right candidate? I know it took 100 days and everything that happened, but was she the right person? And then how does this speak to the governor's race that's getting ready to happen next year here in New Jersey?
Yeah, I think she's an outstanding public servant. I do think the shortness of the runway probably didn't help. You know, she didn't crystallize until Sunday, July 21st, which is a highly unusual, kind of never before reality in America. And my gut tells me, again, this is my gut, I don't have all the data, that when we do have the data and we look at it, we'll probably conclude, if I had to guess, that she wasn't as well known as she would have been had she been out there for a couple of years, even as a sitting vice president. It's a big difference between sitting as the number two and going out there and being on the campaign trail, and you're it. As it relates to the governor's race next year, it's an interesting question. Again, we've been wargaming it, and I think you could look at kind of different sides of this. President Trump, as a sitting president, getting elected the year before I ran, was probably one of the factors that contributed, not the only, I hope, but one of the factors that contributed to our success. You might add same party affiliation, the other side of that coin, when President Biden got elected the year before we went for re-election. So will it be a reaction to a President Trump? Or will he be emboldened? Will people who support him be emboldened? And maybe this is a new reality where you've got Kamala and Tim winning New Jersey by 5 instead of 17, and it becomes a much tighter race. Too early to tell, but that's obviously one that we'll all be watching. Hi, Tracy, please. I'll come back to you guys, I promise.
Speak a bit more about the canary in the coal mine concept. It looks to me, and I recognize everybody's still poring over this,
Yep.
but that she's down now she's up by 4% compared to 16 4 years ago.
Is it down to 4?
It was, I mean, it's
Yep.
obviously, but it appears that it's not so much, there are more votes for Trump, but there are many, many fewer for the Democratic nominee. Can you talk about, what needs to happen in terms of speaking to Democratic voters in places like you cite,
Yep.
where the vote is much, it's depressed from
Yeah.
years ago? Why is that happening? What does it mean about, for example, your administration and really the last 6 years, and what Democrats need to do better?
Yeah. I mean, we won, I think, at the end of the day by 3.3, so we're not too far off of where it sounds like she is landing. I'm not sure whether or not the numbers connect in any way. But listen, I think when you run an election that's closer than you'd like, and even though we won by 3-3, which in a lot of races is a landslide, it was closer than we certainly had on our first election, you do a lot of soul searching. We concluded, you know what, we're staying the course. We're just going to continue to execute, and I'm proud that we made that decision. I also would repeat what I said a minute ago. Down ballot, we had a lot of success in New Jersey yesterday, including in some tough races. The one I'd suggest all of us look at to try to draw some lessons is Passaic County, as I mentioned, where you had 3 commissioners and a sheriff candidate, 2 commissioners running for re-election, 1 first time, and sheriff first time, and Trump won Passaic County, which is not the bluest of counties, as you know. You're up not too far from there. It's got a strong Republican Party head, and our folks did really well. So I'm not sure that the message, if you will, travels through the ballot.
The top level, it was like plus 12.
Yeah. It's the shift is 12-ish, right? 12 or 13 at this point. I'm not sure I've got a good.
The point is that people aren't turning out for Democrats, and why is that, and how should the Democrats respond?
Yeah. So yes and no is my short answer. It depends on who you're looking at. They did turn out in a big way for those Passaic, and they're not unique. We won races all over the state in some cases that were really tough and close. But I think in terms of hers, it's probably not in order as well. Short runway, the economy, kitchen table stuff, immigration, crime, regardless of what the facts might be associated with any of those, the other guys played those cards very effectively. Sir.
Governor, can you share more about your relationship with President Trump since he left office? Obviously, you visited this summer at the assassination front, and a little bit about what your priorities will be during the next year.
The relationship is about what I alluded to as a general matter. We're going to fight for what we believe is being attacked, and we won't pull punches on that front, but we will embrace where we can find common ground. And we've been able to do that, and we've kept up. It's not like I'm on the phone with him every day, but we've kept a relationship up with him and his family. And again, we're going to continue to be the same guys we've been. We were, again, I remind everybody, it feels like a million years ago, but our first 3 years in office, he was president, and that was not easy. Parsing through where you're going to fight like hell versus, you know what, let's see if we can get something done together. And I'm not patting myself on the back by any means, but I think we did a decent job of that, and I would expect to be able to continue to do the same. Please.
Yeah, so first and foremost, do you think that New Jersey is in swing state territory for the foreseeable future? And what do you think the prospects are for the local assembly?
I do not think we're a swing state. I really don't believe that. Although the vice president's margin, it sounds like it's down closer to 4. What did Andy win by? 8 or 9? That's still a good win. Again, I bemoan Sue's losing by, it looks like, 7 or 8. But that district dynamics, top of the ticket. I mean, I think I'll speculate, we'll never know, had the Harris-Walz team had a similar performance to the Biden-Harris result in 2020, my guess is that 7th district would have been a lot closer. But I don't think we're in swing territory. But I tell you, a mistake you could make right now is to put your feet up and think this is just an aberration. And we're not going to do that. In terms of the assembly, I think most of if I had to predict, and again I'm predicting here, I think most of the action, if you will be in the primary on both sides of the aisle. And my gut would tell me that the assembly races in the general would play out in a fairly traditional way. Please.
Governor, what this results meaning for the Latino community, and will you stand by them when the hard times come?
Will I what?
Are you going to stand by the community?
You betcha. I've stood by them from every day, including on some times when it was not easy to do so, when the Trump administration first time out was going after the community, particularly the newly arrived brothers and sisters. We never wavered, and we never will. What does it say? Certainly as a Democrat, you can't, it looks like we may have been taking the Latino community nationally for granted, and shame on us if that's true. You can't do that with any community, and certainly not the Latino community. And we've got to figure out, again, I don't have crisp answers yet, given this just happened, between is there something substantive that we need to change, either as a party or, in my case, as an administration, versus how we communicate with the community. My gut tells me it's probably a little of each. I would just beg, as I have for many, many years, for comprehensive immigration reform, which, by the way, the U.S. Senate had, with great pain, with both sides of the aisle, had come to a great resolution that was very tough, but at the end of the day was supported across the board, and Donald Trump undermined that. We cannot let people forget that. Somehow they did in this election. Please.
Yes, Governor.
I owe you one. I'll come back to you.
You mentioned before, you talked about protecting the state from any type of threats from Washington. Could you talk a little bit more about that? It sounded a little bit cryptic.
No, not cryptic. Reproductive freedom, which we're concerned about. We've passed among the strongest abortion and reproductive freedom protection laws in the nation, but we're going to have to be prepared for potential incomings. Supreme Court has already done a lot of damage, but with all 3 chambers, if the House goes, what could happen as a national matter in terms of legislation? Guns, where we lead the nation in gun safety. By the way, our crime story is a home run crime story. Frankly, nationally, it's also moving in the right direction. But again, the other guys played that card really well. Immigration, what's going to happen? One question I think we all need to ask, is he actually going to do some of the stuff that he said he would do? And, taking the U.S. military and putting it against our own citizens, mass deportations. You asked me, ma'am, what I stand by the community. That's a good example of we're going to make sure people know exactly where we stand. Please.
Do you think there needs to be a change in party leadership, either at the state or county level, to delete the site?
Party leader, I'm the titular head of the party, so I hope the answer is no to that. Listen, they won some. John Curry's been at it for decades, and I give him a lot of credit for winning some really tough county races yesterday, with the other guy carrying the county at the presidential election. I don't think we can hold it against him that the performance from the top of the ticket was meaningfully less than it was 4 years ago. And I think Leroy does a great job as a state party chair. But there'll be a time down the road when we'll all hang up our cleats. I know when my clock is up. But in the meantime, I think we are much better advised to look in the mirror and really try to learn, again, what's the balance between we're doing the wrong things or standing for the wrong things versus we're not communicating what are very good values or very good stands properly to a given community.
You said that the other side played the card well. Do you think it's largely a messaging problem?
No, I think it's a combination, though. As I say, I'm not sure where the facts lie here. Because to say it's only a messaging problem lets all of us off the hook that we're doing everything well. We just can't speak to what we're doing. I think that's too naive. So I don't know where it stops and starts. Versus immigration, I mentioned what the facts are in terms of where we are and why we're there and whose fault it is. They certainly didn't get that message out effectively nationally.
She was first, but if you don't mind,
Sorry, I missed you.
You're good. That's okay.
Okay.
I got you.
how much, and I hate to ask you this question, do you think that race and gender played in this race? We've had two pretty strong female Democratic candidates, and both of them have ended up losing.
Yeah.
How much do you think that might have played, if not locally, nationally?
Yeah. I would hope it didn't play a whole lot here. We're the most diverse state in the nation, big, booming African-American and South Asian communities. So I would be very discouraged to think it played a role here. My gut tells me it did in some form in the bigger sense, which sucks. You hate to ask it, I hate to answer it, but I think it has to be asked. Being a woman on the ballot, first of all, being a woman on the ballot is never easy. My wife had a interesting run through that experience herself. But a woman of African American and South Asian descent, probably doubly, triply so. Again, it's too early to parse through. Did we emphasize the wrong things? Did we not communicate it right? Was racism or sexism involved? To what it's going to be, I think, a combination of all that. Please. He owes you an enormous apology, as do I.
That's all right. Two things I have for you. First one being, you said 4 years ago you worked very closely with President Trump. You're looking to do that again. I think one question to kind of discuss is he campaigned against offshore wind.
Yep.
Can you talk about that? What is the future, especially for our offshore wind?
Yeah. So we worked effectively with him on areas where our values were shared, our common interests were shared. We were incredibly, fiercely protective of our interests when they did not find common ground. That's going to be an interesting one. Offshore wind is going to be interesting. Again, is he going to do what he said versus prosecute a different agenda? One of the realities of winning both the White House and the U.S. Senate is you get to put through your team with very little pushback. So regardless of where the House lands, they have no say in personnel. So everything from judges to who's the head of environmental protection to Secretary of State, everyone in between, they're going to have a free rein. And we're just got to see not just what his actions are versus words on the campaign trail, but who's the team that he puts on the field.
Well, you brought up a good point. I mean, regardless of the House, but checks and balances here. I mean, how are we?
Not feeling too good about that at the moment, which is why, while I'm not optimistic on the House, I'm still praying and hoping it changes. But, you know, when you have the U.S. Supreme Court in the state it's in, the success that he and Majority Leader McConnell had in getting federal judges through generally, not just Supreme Court, winning the White House and the Senate and perhaps the House, that's why it's a little self-serving, but it's true. Governors have never mattered more. I should say this, by the way, we all held serve yesterday in terms of governors. I had hoped would pull New Hampshire down. It was very close, but our candidate was Joyce Craig, former mayor of Manchester. She fought a very good fight, but lost to former U.S. Senator Kelly Ayotte. We won a great race in North Carolina, Josh Stein, and he's going to be succeeded by a terrific attorney general. They won the attorney general's race in North Carolina. Again, like the governor's race, hugely stark contrast. And then we held Washington and Delaware with new candidates, and the other side held the rest of them. Closer race in Indiana than the other side thought, but they still won. David.
Governor, I was talking to a professor the other day about the phenomenon of black and brown men, particularly leaving the Democratic Party. And she pointed out to me an interesting statistic, which is that white women have never voted majority Democrat except twice in the modern age, LBJ and Barack Obama. Every time after that, they voted in the majority for Republican.
Interesting.
What does that say?
That's a good question. I think you saw
You
some.
can't keep blacks, you can't keep Hispanics,
Yeah.
you can't attract white women.
Yeah, I'm not sure any of these are in stone. Although when you're going back to LBJ, you're not in stone, but it's starting to harden. But listen, again, we carried the black vote 94-6 twice, and that wasn't that long ago. I continue to believe that we're on the right side of history with both African Americans and with the Latino community. But clearly the numbers this time around, listen, you can't underestimate this guy. His ability, no matter what you think of him, he has an uncanny ability to connect with people, even when it's not in their own interest. Remember that book, What's the Matter with Kansas, which long predated Donald Trump? It was an analysis of why voters in Kansas, for sort of emotional reasons, voted cold-bloodedly against their self-interest in their own pocketbooks. I'm going to tell you that the Democratic Party is the party of the African-American community, of the Latino community, of women, regardless of race. But he does a very effective job in making connections and swaying votes. I got to go here in a second. Anybody? Tracy, one more?
Just one more, please. Is there anything New Jersey can do to block things like mass deportations? I mean, what mechanisms, what's in your toolbox to safeguard people who are living?
Yeah, so we had the answers on that one specifically, I don't know. Although we actually had a meeting before the election to begin to war game what would happen if this turned out. It was mostly to review what our battle plan was when we were in our first 3 years, and we had we had a high batting average in terms of legal action, something to the effect, including with other states, something to the effect of 70-30 for us. I'm not suggesting on mass deportation that I've got a crisp answer for you, but we will be very aggressive, both with bullhorn, with legal action, with any other action we deem to be necessary. I'll tell you one example which I've never spoken about. This is in particular to your question. There was a time, I'm not sure if you recall, but there was a time when ICE was just randomly showing up on street corners and apprehending more males and female brothers and sisters from the immigrant community, newly arrived community, almost entirely Latino, And we knew there was one area, I won't say where it is, near where I live, where that was at risk, although I don't think they ever actually did show up there. I just went there one night with my detail and just hung out there. So where I go places, several members of security go with me. Whether that scared them off or not, I don't know. But it's an example of a small step that gives you a sense that we're willing to try anything if it's contrary to our values. Again, I'll conclude again with this. If it's contrary to our values, we will fight to the death. If there's an opportunity for common ground, we will seize that as fast as anybody. Thanks very much for coming out.